Okay, great. It's great to see each of you this morning. I'm delighted to be with you, and especially to discuss a topic that is near and dear to me, but certainly a part of every single thing that we do. I want to thank the 28 of you who completed the survey, and I've analyzed your results, and I wanted to just share those with you before we get started. The first question was, on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you in your ability to negotiate effectively, especially when you lack formal authority? That was an interesting question. Again, as I indicated, there were 28 answers, although there was another one this morning. And basically, 50% or more of you feel relatively confident. There were only a few, 3.5%, who did not really feel confident in that process. The next question was, are you challenged when trying to influence outcomes during a negotiation? And every single one of you who responded said yes. And I think that that's something that each of us faces in our work lives, even sometimes in our home lives, if we're negotiating with kids, if we're negotiating with a partner, if we're negotiating with elderly parents, or just out shopping or doing something else. There are always negotiations. And then with the following skills, do you most want to improve in this session? And overwhelmingly, you said handling resistance. So obviously, handling resistance is a real challenge in terms of getting people on board. Framing your message, not so much. Building trust, you seem to be really, really confident. And then handling power dynamics probably came in at a tie with framing your message. One was 67.8, one was 67.86. So basically, they were the same. All of you then seem to have the same type of challenges, and therefore it'll be much easier for us to address what we are discussing today. So I'd really like to start with the concept of what business we are in. We're all in the business of negotiation. And can I confirm that you can see the slide deck? We're in the business of negotiation. And as I indicated, it is part and parcel of every single aspect of our lives. Whether you're negotiating at home, whether you're negotiating at work, whether you're negotiating when you're out shopping, when you're buying an automobile, that's a very big negotiation. You're basically wanting to be in control, wanting to create a win-win, and the win-win is not just for you, but a win for everyone. And so we're going to discuss today that concept and how it impacts you. We'll give a couple of examples from two aspects of your own work that I think will be meaningful to you. So the class is called Mastering Negotiation and Influence, and it's really with or without authority, because I'd like you to keep in mind that you don't need to have a title to have authority. You can be the lowest level person in the mailroom and have authority. A colleague of mine shared something the other day on LinkedIn that was really interesting, and there was someone who was a housekeeper in a hospital system, a large health system, probably over 7 big hospitals and outpatient clinics and more. And that individual had a really good idea for integrating and working more closely with visitors. And they accepted that idea and rolled it out. So you don't need to have a title to be the person who influences. So let's start with the concept of 2 truths and a lie. I'm sure that many of you have played that game. If not, you've seen that game. What you need to do, and you'll enter into the chat, and Christina will help monitor this. You need to share 3 brief stories about yourself because you're all in the same room, except for a couple of you who are using the chat who are online. The rest of you can turn to your neighbor and just share 3 brief stories about yourself. Make 2 of them true and make 1 of them a lie. Then listen to the participants and let's identify the lie. So how about if you turn to your neighbor now? I see lots and lots of people in that room. Let's get started and just tell the person to your left or your right 3 things about you. 2 true, 1 lie. You have 1 minute.
You were on the gun.
Okay, 2 truths, 1 lie. Okay, 8 seconds left.
I'm gonna say. They're just gonna say it's about me.
Okay, time. Let's all come back. And I'd like to have a couple of volunteers. I'd like to have a couple of volunteers. I want you to stand up if you might and just share your 3 brief stories. Who'd like to get us started? Christina, why don't you call on someone?
Okay. I'm going to call on Lucia. You're smiling.
Okay. Tell us your 3 stories.
We were 3, so we didn't have time to go the 3 of us.
So who did do it out of the 3?
Shebangy, but we can't work out which is the lie.
So I mentioned that I'm a big water baby and I'm an expert swimmer and that I've done scuba diving in Maldives. One of them is a lie.
What was the first one?
That I'm a big water baby, get excited around water bodies.
It's a gap between the water baby and the scuba diving. I guess it's scuba diving, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. It's actually, I can't swim. So that's the lie.
Okay. So how many people think that her first choice was true? Just raise your hands. True or false?
True.
No. Okay, I see only 1 hand, I think.
Oh,
Oh, I see a couple. Okay. You think that that's true. How many people think her second statement is true? Okay. Some of you think everything is true. And how many people think the third thing is true of her? How many people think that she simply lies? Okay. Which one is true? What is the true answer?
The first and the third statement were true. The
No,
second
yeah, the
statement-
first two are true, correct?
First and the third.
The first and the third. Okay. And the second one was a lie.
Second one was a lie.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, let's hear from someone else. There's a gentleman in the front. Christina, I'd like to hear from him.
Stephen.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, we hadn't, we only got
Okay.
it first, at least.
2 true, 1 lie.
Okay. My hometown is a place called Galway on the west coast of Ireland.
Yep, I know it. Okay.
Okay, and I grew up beside the sea, so I always loved being close to the sea. And what was it? In my childhood, I climbed Mount Everest.
Really? Wow. Okay. Which ones are true? Which of those are true? Who wants to take a stab at that?
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Very good.
So which ones are true?
1 and 2.
1 and 2 are true. You haven't climbed Mount Everest as a child?
No.
No, I was
No,
going to
sir.
ask, how old were you when you climbed Mount Everest? Okay, all right, thank you. Let's hear from one more person. Give us 3 statements about yourself, 2 true and 1 lie.
My 3 statements were, I've worked for BMS for 18 years. The second statement was that I'm training for 3 marathons this year. And the third statement was that I have 2 children, 2 dogs, and 2 hamsters.
Okay, 2 children, 2 dogs, 2 hamsters. Okay. All right, what do you think, folks? Which of those statements might be true?
Two hamsters, 3 marathons seems excessive.
Yeah, me. She's saying. She said, I made 3, so it's much of a 3 marathons. Great. I said I was training for 3 marathons. Like, I was doing, 2 children, 17 dogs. 3 marathons.
Okay.
I'm trying to get away from them.
All right, let me ask you a question. Have you been there for 18 years?
Have.
Okay, do you really have 2 children, 2 dogs, and 2 hamsters?
I do.
You do. Okay, so we've identified her lie, correct?
Yeah.
You should attempt to play this game with your colleagues, with your peers, maybe once a month or so, just as an onboarding activity, because it helps you to learn more about those people with whom you work. Often we work side by side with someone and we really don't know who they are or what their real story is. I worked with someone once who said that she had 17 pets, and I thought that that was a lie, but it was absolutely true because she was counting her chickens and her ducks and her everything else, her ponies and everything that she possibly had that lived on her farm, but she didn't tell us that she lived on a farm. So of course she had lots and lots and lots of animals. So let's move along. This is really all about power, and negotiation implies power. It really does. Negotiation is, as a definition, it's when 2 or more people seek to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. Influence, on the other hand, is the ability to shape outcomes, perceptions, and decisions, but it's not necessarily a negotiation. And then authority is the power to influence someone's opinion or behavior. So when we look at negotiation, we're looking at 2 different kinds. Distributive negotiation, that's a win-lose. That's when you haggle over a price. You want to buy something on the beach in Mexico, and you know that you can haggle the price, and the vendor might say, that's $25, and you might say, I'll give you 10. That's haggling. I used to haggle a lot just for fun, to be honest. I spent probably 2 weeks out of every month for 12 years working in the former Soviet Union. And when we went to the flea market on Sunday, there were lots and lots of people who were selling all kinds of wares. Some of them I needed and wanted. I didn't realize that the china that I was buying was painted with lead paint, but some things looked really nice and I wanted them for my flat. And so I would haggle. And if I started out at something and I said $20, or they said $20 and I said 10, I might have gotten the negotiation down to about $5. But when the end came of the negotiation, I basically handed them $25 because I felt as if they needed the money more than I did. And the joy, the fun was really just in haggling. But haggling wastes people's time. It wastes your time. And it's really not that much fun. And I think that post-COVID, people tend to steer away from people who are haggling. If you've ever bought a car, how many of you have ever purchased an automobile? Basically everybody. My grandson, who's only 15, just bought a car, a truck actually, for his business. He has an LLC and a holding company. His business is a lawn care and snow removal business, which right now is very busy because we have a lot of snow in our area. And so he saved up all of his money from last year, and he was able to save $27,000 and buy a used truck for his business. He haggled, but he didn't really haggle. His dad went with him because you can't purchase a vehicle like that if you're only 15 and don't even have a learner's permit. His dad went with him, and the only haggle he did was, look, he's just a kid. He's a sophomore in high school. Give him a break. Every single penny of this is his money. And the vendor lowered the price by about $2,000, which was a win. It was a win for both of them. And he threw in a new transmission, 4 new tires, and floor mats, which was a real deal, right? And the car drives. Unlike my older daughter who once bought a car and it lasted for about 35 minutes before it stopped dead by the side of the road. And she had bought it basically from a neighbor from an ad in the paper before the internet. And it was a real clunker. And then there's integrative, where there is, in fact, a win-win, such as in partnership. 2 or more people seek to reach a mutually beneficial agreement. So let's look at that, because there are challenges that we face all the time. It's negotiating without authority, so lack of credibility, maybe perceived expertise, limited access to people who are able to make a decision. When you go to the car dealer and they say, well, gee, I don't know. And you say, is that the best I can do? And then they say, well, let me talk to my manager. There may or may not even be a manager, but they say that. Reduced leverage, risk of being perhaps overlooked, and then navigating. Certainly in the office, it's office politics. So how do you succeed when you're negotiating without authority? How do you? First of all, you focus on relationship building. People are more likely to listen to and support someone they trust and respect. Rely on data and logic. Use objective evidence to support your case and appeal to logic. Although not everyone, especially in the United States right now, thinks logically. Show empathy. Understand the other person's perspective to find some sort of common ground. Be creative. Think outside the box to craft a solution that will benefit everyone. Be willing to give and take. Exude confidence, even if you are the least confident person in the room. Look as if and sound as if you have some level of confidence. And that comes from a strong presence, clear communication. All of this can compensate for a lack of authority, because negotiating without a title requires strategy, preparation, and interpersonal finesse. But these challenges can be transformed into opportunities to demonstrate your leadership and your influence. So let's ask a couple of questions about this. How many of you in the room, just by a raise of hands, think that you are an influencer? How many people think that others would listen to them, that you have influence? No, but no influencers in this room? I think not. I think there are some influencers, yes. So think about the influencers who come to mind in society or in history. It might be the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. It might be Viktor Frankl. He was influential in the lives of many people, especially when it came to things like concentration camps during World War II and more. Someone like Dolly Parton, an American icon, had a distinct perspective. She said, storms make trees take deeper roots. He was saying life isn't easy, and you can see your scars as evidence, and you can appear wounded, but determined to grow. Most of us would choose to grow rather than be woe is me, doom and gloom. When I was growing up as the middle of 5 children, my mother was happiest when all 5 of us hated one another and everyone was crying. Can you imagine being in a household like that with 5 kids under 7? And she was only happy when people were crying. I tend to think, and I know for a fact, that she wasn't really crazy about being a mom in the first place. And I think that it was just too overwhelming for her at a very, very young age. So think about the influencers in your life. If there is someone you recognize as an influencer right there at BMS, who might that be? Who is the most influential person in your organization? Is it your CEO? Is it your CFO? Because that person controls the dollars. Is it the chairman of your board? Who's the most influential person? What do you think? Anyone have an idea? You can guess.
You can take it from a site perspective, it might be easier for example, people parking, the silence.
Okay. Sometimes the most influential person in an organization, especially when everyone is returning to work, is the person who controls parking in the parking lot and parking spaces. Sometimes it's better to get a place up front, a place where you don't have to walk as far, a place perhaps closer to the cafeteria or the lunchroom or the exit, depending upon where you are. What about in your household? In your household, whether it's solo, whether you have a partner, whether you have kids or you have older people living with you, who's the most influential person? Who is that? Is it you? Or do you sometimes feel as if you have no influence? Who's the most influential person in your household?
The mother.
Your mother. Okay. All right. Okay. In my house, I like to think that it's me. And my husband humors me and allows me to think that it's me. And we have a couple of grandkids who are very young, except for the one who's 15. And they call us GM and GP for grandpa and grandma. But grandma to me means general manager. That means that I'm in charge. That means that what I say, even though I'm listening to all of them, basically I'm going to have credibility. I'm going to have that final say. So I'm going to share an exercise with you about the impact of influence on negotiation. And basically it's more than persuasion. And I want you to think about a movie or a mini series that you might have seen on Netflix, or a documentary, such as the one about the McDonald's and eating that hamburger that basically almost killed someone. But I'm going to give you 3 movies. You may or may not have seen them. One of them was Erin Brockovich. That was an environmental movie. The next one was The Queen's Gambit. That was the one about chess. And the third one on your screen is The Godfather, and that's a classic back from 1972. So are you all familiar with The Godfather? Everybody knows a little bit about mafia, right? I lived in Chicago for 30 years and we had a lot of mafia. And people used to come there just to see Al Capone's museum. So The Godfather. The plot is the story of the Corleone crime family and their negotiations for power and for survival. What are the insights into Mr. Corleone's negotiation? I'm going to make him an offer that he can't refuse. That is perhaps the most famous line in the entire movie. I sometimes will say that to my kids. I'm going to make you an offer that you cannot refuse. And they'll laugh. They know where it's coming from. They've watched enough TV to know, but they know that it's not really true. But it demonstrates relationships and leverage and incentives to influence the outcome, because the man says it with such force that you think, if I don't listen, I'm going to end up somewhere in jail or with a bullet in my chest. I must listen. So the key takeaway from that is that influence is about understanding what motivates others and offering solutions that align with their interests. Let's look next at the Queen's Gambit. Okay, that's in the middle. The Queen's Gambit was a 2020 miniseries. How many of you play chess? Raise of hands. You play chess? Do you like chess? You think it's fun? I don't play chess. I know the names of the pieces finally, but I am not a strategy person when it comes to chess. I can move some things around, but I'm more a backgammon or a Scrabble or a something else. But in the Queen's Gambit, there's a young girl, a young chess prodigy. She happens to also be adorable. And basically, it's about her rise in a male-dominated sport. Now, I've been to a bunch of chess tournaments, and when I look, I've looked at some that neighbors and other kids have attended and participated in. There are some of the chess players who are only 6 and 7 years old, and they're against someone who is easily 70 or 80 years old. And those kids have such confidence and such control, and they're so strategic in terms of their thinking that they truly are being influential. Well, the negotiation insight for the Gambit movie is that Beth, the young lady, uses strategic thinking and understands her opponent's psychology in order to succeed. She's thinking, what are they thinking? What will be their next move? And her alliances with unlikely individuals help her overcome her challenges. The key takeaway in that movie is that influence often comes from strategic foresight and collaboration. And now let's look at Erin Brockovich. Are you all familiar with the Erin Brockovich movie and the environment, the issue about the environment?
Yeah.
Erin is a legal assistant. She builds a case against a large utility company that's accused of contaminating the water. What is the negotiation insight? She uses empathy She pleads to them. She uses storytelling. She tells what's going on in her life and how it's impacting she and her family to win the trust of the affected residents and secure their cooperation. She persuades, because she's penniless, she persuades lawyers to take the case by demonstrating the magnitude of the problem and that this could be a class action suit. And the key takeaway is the emotional connection, the persistence. And because she's pleading with people, she can amplify her influence. She can shoot it straight up, even when she lacks any authority. She's able to make that happen. So the types of influence are going to be basically expert, relational, and positional. Let's look at that a little bit. Okay, expert, relational, and positional. Expert, the source of power, is really your knowledge. Does it require authority? No, but it's best for technical or specialized situations. If you're a scientist, you have influence as an expert. You can fail without recognition of expertise. Relational is about trust and relationships. Does it require authority? No. It's collaborative. It's team settings. It's working with people, not against them. You have to take time to build and maintain those relationships, because it is those relationships that are going to allow you to advance in your career trajectory. And the last one is positional. Does it require authority? Absolutely yes, because it's hierarchical. It's about formal context. You may not inspire loyalty or trust, but when you're in charge, you know that you're in charge. And from that position, from that title alone, you are influencing. So what are the dynamics of negotiation? It's a psychology of influence, trust, credibility and rapport, relationship building, and leveraging emotional intelligence. That's really what it's all about. So let's move on. Let's look at the psychological impact of influence. Okay? Trust, cognitive biases, and decision making. We all know what trust is. When we're in a trusted relationship, we feel it. When we can trust the person next to us, we know it. When we can trust our elected officials, we know it, although sometimes it's questionable. But in general, we know it. What about cognitive biases? Cognitive biases are when we have a distorted perception. It's perhaps when we're confirming pre-existing beliefs. We think something, so therefore it must be true. When we're relying on the first piece of information that we get, and we don't bother to survey the other people in the room to ask them what their opinion is. What matters most to you? Instead, I'm taking my opinion only from one person. It's about overconfidence, and it's often about hindsight. It's not a good place to be. As a matter of fact, it's an uncomfortable place to be. When we look at the concept of decision making, we can reach a decision, and we can do it if we challenge our own cognitive biases, but if we build that relationship based on trust and then reach a decision that is in fact going to be a win for all of us. So the dynamics of influence are again about influence and trust, credibility and rapport, relationship building, and leveraging EI. I think that you're all familiar with EI. It's going to come up a couple of times, but what about emotional intelligence? It's knowing your own self-awareness. What are your triggers? Do you influence with empathy? Do you have emotional regulation? Are you impassive? Do you have social skills like respect and cooperation? Do you avoid a competitive environment, one that is in fact going to cause someone to be hurt in some way? Let's look at the influence equation. This is where we take influence, which equals trust, plus credibility, plus connection. Now, I don't know if you're a math wizard or not. My kids sometimes laugh when they ask for help with something related to math. And they know that most of my math skills deal with the metric system and microdosing. mostly for babies that weigh less than a couple of grams. But when we combine the equation, to demonstrate influence equals trust plus credibility plus connection. That creates a scenario where all three elements are so visible that there is no question from anyone in the room in terms of what matters most. You set the scene, perhaps it's a group project with varying options. We'll have something like that later on, an exercise. We build trust, we're transparent about our challenges, and we seek everyone's input. We show credibility, we provide expert knowledge or evidence to guide the discussion. We foster connection. We recognize and validate each team member's contribution because everybody matters. And we achieve influence because we're using trust, credibility, and connection to gain consensus and to inspire a collective action. We want to create a situation in which everyone feels as if they have gained something. So from your own experience, what matters most? Is it trust? Is it credibility or connection? How many people say trust? To me, all three are equal, by the way. How many people say credibility? You want to advise an expert. When people are in a court of law, they bring in an expert witness, and they bring in the expert whom they vetted because they need to have that expert opinion. And what about connection? Connections matter, don't they? If you don't have a good relationship with the other people in your working group, it's going to be very, very difficult to get anything done. Let's move on. Relationship building. This is using established relationships to foster collaboration so that everyone is on the same page, or as I like to say, singing from the same sheet music. We've all got the message. We understand what it is. When we call a client, or when we're giving a sales pitch, or when we're promoting something that's in R&D or perhaps in marketing, we want to be able to use the same script. We want our respondent to hear the same message from two different people in the organization. We don't want to say, well, which version did I tell that person? Or which version did I tell that person? Our kids sometimes laugh at me because I might, in a humorous way, deduct a couple of years from my age, no more than 3. And they'll say, well, if you're 3 years younger, how old did you say we are? And then I have to remember how old I told which person each of them happens to be. I did that mainly when I was very, very young, and they still laugh and they still joke about it because they've read about it many, many times in a life history that we've all dictated so that they have something to remember us all by. But it turns out to be relatively amusing. We talked about emotional intelligence, self-awareness, empathy, self-regulation, and social skills. And next, we have the fundamentals. What are the fundamentals? Everybody's interest matters. Everybody in the room matters. It's intentional listening. Listening and not interrupting, but waiting for each person to finish their sentence while you're listening and not thinking, well, how will I respond to what they just said? Instead, it's listening with intention so that you understand their viewpoint. It's asking the right questions. I know everyone worldwide has heard of Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey has a theory that is, if you ask the right questions, eventually you will always get the right answer. And then structuring something in which everyone wins. So you have to negotiate, and there needs to be some preparation. How do you do it? How do you do it? How do you prepare for negotiation? Do you think, well, I have $20 to spend. Let me see what I can get the most bang for my butt here on the beach. Do you think, well, I need to buy a car, but I really don't want to have a payment that is more than whatever number of euros per month? So if I go to the salesperson and I say, this is my budget, will I be able to come in under budget? Or if you're negotiating with family and one person wants to go to the Bahamas and the other one wants to go to Iceland, obviously there's different packing for both. Which will be closer? Which will be further? Do I want to spend my weekend in Connemara, or do I want to spend it in downtown Dublin? Where do I want to be? What is my negotiation? Do I want to attend my child's school play and send my partner to our other child's sporting event? Which do I want to do? There's always a negotiation, but you have to understand your goals and your limits. And we call that BATNA, and we'll talk about it. You have to research the other person's goals, needs, and potential constraints. What's holding them back? What's in their way? You have to develop a clear value proposition, and you have to practice empathy. You must be empathic. So let's look at BATNA. What is BATNA? BATNA is the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. The best alternative that we can possibly come up with. It might not be what everyone wants, but it will be something that brings everyone acceptance. When you ask what if negotiation fails for any reason, this is the solution that you are willing to accept. You can't come to common terms. You can't reach common ground. There is no agreement, but you can agree on certain aspects of the discussion. And this will be your best alternative to what you could have negotiated. Best is better than nothing. So negotiation strategies. Think about your voice. Sorry, your voice is one of the most powerful tools that you have as a leader. You open with a hook. You grab someone's attention. You use a quotation. You use a survey question. When I opened today's session, I said, what business are we in? That's a question. Hopefully it got your attention because you're thinking, well, I thought that I was in the pharma science business, or I thought that I was in the medical device business, or I thought this, or I thought that. But when I think about it, we really are in the business of negotiation. So Peter Drucker used to quote, he said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. That invites collaboration. That's a great way to start a negotiation. He's saying, I invite you to be part of the process. So key negotiation strategies are things like problem solving, framing, anchoring, and believe it or not, tactical silence. The power of the pause. When you're negotiating for that new flat or that new car or that new whatever it is, office lease, when you stop and pause for a moment, it puts the other person on edge. It makes them think, are they going to walk away? Is that the end of the discussion? What could they possibly be thinking? When you're in a negotiation and you're talking about a job raise, you're asking your boss for a raise, you have validated why you need that raise. You've substantiated your case. And then you stop and pause. What are you waiting for when you pause? What do you think? Let's hear from someone. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for their response? Are you waiting for them to consider what it is you said? When you pause, are you thinking, oh no, this is one and done? I've basically blown it. Or, wow, I really delivered my case. Now it's up to them to decide that they're going to give me a 60% raise. That would be a very nice gift, would it not? Yeah. Okay. So what are you thinking when that pause occurs, either on your part or on the part of the person with whom you're speaking?
You're waiting for their response, or you want them to make a response.
Okay, you want them to respond to you. How long can you possibly wait? Can you sit there? Certainly not with your arms closed, because that basically destroys the relationship. You want to be open. So how long are you willing to wait? What is your name?
Sorry, Stephen.
Stephen. Okay, that's an easy name. That's my husband's name. So Stephen, how long are you willing to wait?
As long as you need for that. The longer you wait, the more pressure is on them to respond.
On the other person. That's
Yeah.
right. And Stephen, by the way, my best negotiation with my Stephen was, I met him on a blind date. We went out 5 times. He was late for every single date. And I was working the night shift and day shift at the time. So 2 8-hour shifts. And if he came to pick me up for a 7 o'clock date, but didn't show up until 9, I had to go to work at 10:30. So those dates were not very long, right? I decided though, before I even met him face to face on a telephone call, that I was going to marry him sight unseen. Because he talked about what an amazing family he had and how everyone knew everyone's name and they were so kind to one another. And I was thinking to myself, gosh, I've been shopping for a family for 20 years. Here's somebody who comes across the border from Canada with one. Let me grab him with his green card before somebody else does. And so I boldly said, I'm not working Wednesday. Do you want to get married? This is on the 5th date. I'm not working Wednesday. Do you want to get married? And he looked at me and said, yes. And we did. We eloped, and the orderly who carried bodies to the morgue with me at night was our witness, but we eloped and have been married ever since. And I always say that he was well worth resuscitating, which is an entire other story. But he truly was. He was. When there was a drug interaction and 2 doctors almost killed him, yes, he was well worth saving. No question whatsoever. So there are negotiations that we make in all aspects of our lives, and it might be something as simple as, hey, do you want to get married? How do you persuade people? How do you draw them in with a magnet? How do you get them to be attracted to you? Usually it's with things like reciprocity, it's with scarcity. Gosh, we only have 1 left, or there are only 2 more at this price. I went on to Eventbrite the other day to buy a ticket to something, and it said that there were only 9 left. I got my family to buy 8 of those 9 tickets to an event. I went back the next day and I saw that the event planner had uploaded another 10 tickets. So she made it sound as if, gosh, there's only 1 or 2 left. You better hurry up and get them. We're closing out at the end of the day, or this sale ends at, or you can submit up until 11:59 p.m. on whatever day. And then you turn around and we've extended our deadline, or we've decided because there was so much interest, or because so many of you showed up, we've decided to expand it. So many people use scarcity to persuade. Authority persuades, consistency persuades, using that same message, and then social proof, which drives all of us nuts, because everybody has social proof in the media, and they say, well, this worked for me. How many ads do you see? Gosh, I think either on your Facebook account, or I don't know if you use TikTok, if you use Instagram, there is one ad, and they seem to appear every time, perhaps for the ladies in the room. You walk past a cosmetic counter, and all of a sudden, thanks to AI, you have 500 ads for cosmetic products that appear in your thread. They appear in your feed. You've got all of these messages. And then you have 5 or 6 in a row that talk to you about, if you wear this undergarment, you will look 50 pounds thinner. Or I lost 75 pounds on Ozempic, and you can too. Or it's something about, if you use this, all of your wrinkles will disappear. And even 20-year-olds who don't have a wrinkle anywhere are willing to buy something and try it because of the persuasion, because somebody said, hey, this will work, and it's social proof. So social proof is a huge factor when it comes to influencing others. I don't know if it's good or if it's bad. And then what about navigating challenges? This is when you deal with difficult personalities and you can overcome deadlocks. You often bring in a third-party mediator. If you're in a lawsuit, for example, and it's a personal injury lawsuit, and there's a plaintiff and a defendant, and no one can really seem to get to a decision, and the lawyers don't want to go to court, they'll sometimes bring in a third party. They'll be able to reach common ground, and you must be willing to decide where it is you're going to walk away. Gosh, you wanted a $2 million settlement, and I only offered you $1 million? Well, you know what? I'll take $1 million because that's a lot of money to me, and I'm willing to walk away for the $1 million. You ask yourself the questions, what if? What are the questions that come to mind when you are thinking about this? What if? I'm in a negotiation. What if? What if I have no authority, right? What if people don't listen to me? What if I have framed and reframed multiple times and I'm still not getting their attention? What if I didn't take the time to build a coalition? When my husband was running hospitals, he used to go to his board and sell them on an issue before the board meeting and before the board vote. So when it came time for the actual meeting and they asked how many ayes, everyone raised their hand because they were already on board. He had built that coalition. Who are your allies in the room? What if the other party doesn't accept? What kinds of what if questions would you ask? What comes to mind when you say what if? What if it doesn't work? What if the person doesn't show, they call in sick and they're not even there? What if I fail? Fear of failure is a huge thing. And fear of failure, by the way, is really just a note in your own mind that you're thinking differently and that you're thinking outside the box. Perhaps you're on the cusp of a really great idea. So what if is really important. You should pencil down some of those what if questions that you would ask. What if there is resistance? That was a huge issue in the survey. What if the conversation is really difficult? Here we come into things like conflict and diplomacy. And what if I get pushback? Am I going to stand firm? Am I going to compromise? Am I going to problem solve? When we handle resistance in negotiations, it requires patience, it requires strategic thinking, and it requires effective communication. You have to address resistance thoughtfully and use techniques that promote collaboration rather than confrontation. Again, you're going to listen actively. You're going to understand the underlying concerns behind the resistance. By actively listening, you can identify their root cause and address them. You have to acknowledge and validate. You have to acknowledge the other person's concerns and validate their feelings. This shows respect for their position and can open the door to more dialogue. You have to be willing to reframe the conversation and to shift the focus from what's not working to what could be mutually beneficial, emphasizing shared goals, presenting creative solutions that meet both parties' interests, fostering collaboration and problem solving. In politics, we call that working both sides of the aisle, getting an opinion from everyone so that eventually our constituents, our representatives, and our communities will benefit from whatever it is. In real world negotiation, we can apply this, and we're going to apply it right now to two different scenarios. One is R&D and one is commercial. Okay, let's look at these two scenarios. R&D. The R&D team, how many of you might be in research and development? Anybody in research and development? Or work in that space or know someone who does? Or any of you in the commercial space? Okay, this is going to be interesting. We have a couple of people and a couple. The R&D team is focused on scientific excellence. They want to ensure that the new drug meets all regulatory standards and therapeutic goals. The commercial team is focused on time to market. How long will it take me to get this drug to market? And maximizing the dollars. It's like when you work for an organization and they put profits before people. That's the commercial team. They're looking at the profitability. A disagreement arises over the drug's launch timeline. I'm sure that's happened. I see it happen in pharma companies all the time. So a traditional position-based negotiation would be R&D is going to say, we need, gosh, at a minimum, 8 to 12 more months to complete our testing so that we feel confident that we can actually put this out there when we've done the 4 phases of work that is going to complete the handset, the insert that comes with the drug and allow us to feel confident in terms of safety and outcomes. And the commercial people come along and say, we need to launch in 6 months. We don't have 8 to 12 months, folks. We need to launch in 6 months to hit the market and meet revenue goals. This happens a lot. I publish a lot of books. So I'm doing my 25th book now. I needed to meet a deadline of November because that book has to come out by March 1st. So it can be available for that organization's meeting at the end of March, and they are also the publisher. It also has to come out before June because June 30th is the entry period for an international award. And they want to make sure that all of the books that they publish are eligible for that award each year so that they can maximize their numbers. Everybody has their own goal. Everybody has their own position. But basically, in a traditional position-based situation, it could lead to a stalemate because there's a difference between 6 months and 8 months and a bigger difference between 6 and 12. Or a compromise that partially satisfies both parties but doesn't fully address their needs, and no one really walks away satisfied. That's a terrible situation in which to be. Let's look at their interests, each of their interests. So R&D is about patient safety, regulatory compliance, and long-term efficiency. Commercial is about the market share. I want to control that market. Why do I start selling Christmas supplies at Halloween? Because I want my stuff out there early and I want to control the market. Last week at the store, I saw Valentine's, and then in the next aisle, I saw Easter. There's a big difference between Valentine's and Easter. We're talking February to perhaps April. depending upon the calendar. And yet everything is out there because I don't want to miss a mark. And guess what? In between, there was a little bit of St. Patty's Day, just a little. Commercial is about market share, beating the competition, and creating revenues. By understanding each person's interests, they identify a win situation. They agreed to a phased launch approach. First, in a limited market for faster entry, so piloting a product or piloting a drug, while continuing to collect their data and refine it for broader approval. They aligned on cross-departmental support, such as commercial assisting R&D. Guess what? You can help us to fast-track specific testing phases for additional resources. They worked together. They were interest-based, but they were able to come up with something that allowed them both to succeed. So what are the outcomes? When we're looking at outcomes, we're looking at patient safety. That is first and foremost, in my mind, and I taught intravenous pharmacology for 35 years, that to me is the most important thing, the outcome, the safety. Compliance, scientific integrity, market entry goals. Years ago, I still remember a situation at a hospital where I worked in Florida, and there was a patient who had been overdosed on heparin. You all know that heparin is an anticoagulant. It makes your blood a little bit thinner. It makes you bleed more quickly. If you're shaving, you don't want to shave with a straight razor because for sure you're going to bleed. The patient received too much heparin. And the doctor came along and he ordered an antagonist to the heparin. He ordered protamine. And he ordered a dose that I knew and my intravenous infusion specialist team knew was way too high. And none of us would give that drug. We were nurses. He was the doctor. He was in charge. He had authority and we did not. But we had knowledge of the drug. Often we find doctors who, because there's so much going on, don't really understand the ramifications of one drug clicking with another one in the bloodstream, even if one is oral and one is IV, and that it can kill someone. We knew the dose was too high. And we said collectively, the dose is too high. Per our standards, we're not allowed to give that dose. If you'd like to give it, please give it yourself. The doctor took the syringe from our hands. He gave the drug and the patient died within 3 minutes. That is something you never want to happen. I still remember the look on my colleagues' faces and what happened to that patient who we failed to resuscitate because the doctor was so steadfast in his opinion and what he thought mattered most. What mattered most was I'm the doctor and therefore I'm in charge. That doesn't often mean, and it doesn't always mean that that's right. So it's about patient safety, compliance, scientific integrity, and market entry goals, plus the power of interest-based negotiation. So how do you succeed? How do you get ahead? Okay, so tips for success. Be prepared like a Boy Scout, like a Girl Scout. Stay flexible. Know when to walk away. Know when, hey, you know, I'm not doing this anymore. My husband used to have the thrill of the chase in buying a car. Sometimes he would go to 5 or 6 dealers in a week. He would try to negotiate with everybody and he would always walk away. I never understood the process. Finally, when we moved to Maryland from Chicago a few years ago, we found a dealer whose price is the price. Whatever he says is the price, that's it, and there is no negotiation. It's because he offers such a good price and he offers free service for the life of the car. And he offers free this and free that and free oil changes and free other things that you just think, okay, the package itself is really good. There is no fun in this negotiation. And I'll just go with it and pay and know that I can get free service, that I can get a ride to and from the dealership when I need service, that I can get a loaner if I need one, even on a moment's notice, and that they're nice people. And they always have a fridge full of water and they always have half decent snacks. So it's not really a bad deal. It's not bad. But basically you prepare, you stay flexible, you know when to walk away, and you reflect on every negotiation for continuous improvement. Learn from what you did and do it better the next time. So what are the building blocks of negotiation? When you tell a story or when you watch a movie, even though some movies that I don't like to watch because they keep reverting back to what happened in someone's childhood, and then I get confused. But when you tell a story, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Negotiation is so much more than a beginning, a middle, and an end. It includes conflict. It includes a protagonist. It includes resolution. It includes character development. When you watch a great movie, and they're building this person up and they're so hateful that you don't want to be in the same room with them, they've done a great job of making you think that that person is terrible, that they're not someone with whom you'd want to connect. They've built their case. They've built their story. It can also entertain, it can inform, it can inspire, or it can provoke thought. I want to talk to you about the orange interest-based negotiation. We're going to take 5 minutes to negotiate and 3 minutes to debrief. Hopefully we'll have enough time to do this, but I don't know if you're familiar, first of all, with the two sisters and an orange. Has anyone ever heard of that story?
No.
Okay, we'll modify this a little bit. So there's a story, and it's a classic from the management literature on conflict resolution and negotiation that was first told over 100 years ago by the American social worker, Mary Parker Follett. And she's often called the mother of modern management because she contributes to organizational behavior and organizational theory. So she told the story of two sisters who were negotiating, actually fighting over an orange. Can you imagine? One orange, two sisters. They were both using a different cooking recipe that called for an orange, and neither one wanted to go back to the grocery to purchase another orange. They settled their argument by simply cutting the orange in half. Everything worked out in the end, right? No. As it turns out, one of the sisters just needed the juice from the orange. She didn't want the rest of the orange. She didn't want the peels. She didn't want the pulp. While the other just needed the peel for her recipe. Neither recipe worked with just half of an orange. So in the end, neither sister was able to use the orange. There's a clear lesson here. The two sisters were using what is called a distributive bargaining technique. This is what is commonly called zero-sum game. One person, but only one person gains at only what the other person loses. So nobody got all of the juice and nobody got all of the peels. Because if she took the whole orange and squeezed out all the juice, she had destroyed the peel that perhaps might not be usable by the other sister. Now, Mary Parker Follett suggested that the two sisters should have been using integrative bargaining. That's when the two parties collaborate to find a win-win. We talked about that. Both parties get something out of it. The idea is to get something out of it. So imagine what would have happened if the two sisters in the story followed that approach. One sister would have all of the juice from the whole orange for her recipe, while the other sister would have had all of the peel from the orange for hers. Both sisters would have been winners. In this case, neither one of them was the winner, which is really a challenge. So when we do this, because of time limitation, let's have just a couple of people volunteer to do this. I need 2 volunteers. Don't be shy. It's fun. You don't need to like oranges.
I can be one.
Okay, 2 people. There you go. Let's decide how you're going to divide an orange between you. I want you to talk to the other person. Are they next to you? Where's your second person?
Okay.
Okay, Stephen will be your second person. You're going to divide an orange. Talk about for a second, how are you going to divide it? What do you want to do? Are you going to eat the orange? Is it for a recipe? Is it for snacks? What is it for?
What do you want the orange for?
Maybe a little louder.
Loud.
Okay, I just want the juice.
You just want
I
the
want
juice.
as well. What if I wanted the juice as well?
What if you want the juice? You're going to negotiate with him.
Okay. So
Negotiate
I
verbally.
I
Okay.
can pick whatever I want from the orange, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So I want the juice as well.
How much juice do you want?
3/4 of the
Oh.
juice.
Interesting.
Would you take less than 3/4?
Stephen, are you willing to give her 3/4?
No.
No? Huh. Way to go, Stephen. Why don't you offer her a lemon instead? Seriously, you're not willing to give her 3/4 of the juice?
No, I want half.
You want half. Okay.
Half the juice. So
What do you want the juice for?
I have a recipe.
Can't you adjust the measurements of your recipe?
No.
If you have the measurements, well, you can't have it. I can't have it because I have just one egg and I can't have that egg. So
I have hungry children.
Are you offering to trade him an egg for an orange? I misunderstood that.
No, I said that I need 3/4 because my recipe has one egg and I can't divide.
Ah.
it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the composition won't be right. Okay.
Exactly.
So what are you going to do? Are you going to buy another orange?
I can't because I have 2-year-old kids and I can't leave him at home alone.
Oh, that's a challenge.
I have hungry children that need a recipe based on half a juice.
Okay, well, Stephen, have you already started your recipe? Have you already started to cook?
No,
I did.
So that to me is a negotiation. She's already in the process. She probably cracked the egg. It's probably sitting in the bowl. Maybe she separated the whites from the yolk. What will she do when she's like midstream in the middle of a recipe and you've not yet started? Are you willing to give a little bit? Are you willing to budge a little?
yeah, but I can't get dragged into her detail. I need to keep with my detail
Of course
because
you do.
mine is to get half the juice.
Okay.
So she's trying to tip it so that she can get 3/4, and I'm willing to go give her up to half, but then you're just trying to find that middle ground. So then.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry,
Can she dilute her juice a little bit with water? Can she add water and water it down a little? Is that an
No,
option?
I need the acidity of the orange to beat up my whites. But
You're a little
I-
greedy. Okay. Okay. But what?
But if you're patient, I can use half and see if it's enough. And if it's not, we would need to find another solution. Maybe a hard no.
That's not giving me anything. That's.
Okay, let's do something. We are just fighting for a quarter, right? Because you have half and I have half. So let's quarter that in half.
Are you happy with that, Stephen?
No, not really. I'm getting less than half.
Not really. So you're going to go back to, you'll go
Yeah,
back to the table and negotiate further?
Yes.
Okay.
What?
Okay, you'll put your recipe away for the day
Yes, so.
and wonder what happens to that cracked egg?
It's in the fridge, it's in the fridge, it's in the fridge. So
It's in the fridge.
Yeah.
Okay, so for now it's in the icebox. Okay, that's good.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, how does influence shape negotiation strategies? You've seen that negotiation and influence are tied. Influence really matters. One party is negotiating, I need to have this and I'm not willing to budge, and the other party is willing to do something else. But sometimes those two just don't work. So when we look at that, we're talking about building rapport, framing the discussion, and using reciprocity, making sure that everybody gets something, even if it's not enough or even if it's dilute juice. So how do we influence others? We influence others using something called the 3 Ps: position, which is power; perspective, which is empathy; and problems, which are the solutions. Problems can always create solutions. And what are practical tips for leveraging influence in negotiation? Establish common ground. Figure out what will work for each of you. Be willing to walk away. In this case, I think Stephen was willing to walk away. Active listening. Be assertive, not aggressive. Sometimes, and if you look around the room that you're in, there are generational needs and expectations. One person might not want what you want or not understand what it is you want. So you need to know your audience. You use inclusive language. You blend the formats so that there's perhaps traditional storytelling with some modern visual aids. You highlight common ground and focus on universal themes. You encourage interaction, and you remain flexible depending upon the audience, because people's perceptions, and especially now that there are 6 levels of generations in the workforce, including Gen Alpha, a very opinionated young group, we're in for a real treat. So from an action planning standpoint, we need to look at next practices. Next practices are, what are the lessons that we learned and what are the key takeaways? I'm going to share with you a graph, and you'll have this, This is the negotiation lifestyle. You decide to negotiate, you prepare to negotiate, you negotiate, you execute, you follow up, you nurture the relationship, you check compliance, you make sure that everyone feels as if they got something. Because if they don't feel as if they got something, they will not be happy. So we have a what and we have a why. Our what is, in this case, it was the product launch timeline. It was revenue sharing in a joint venture. It's power dynamics and decision making. It's persuasion. It's the value of high price service through benefits. And our why is to convince other people, to agree on something, to resolve an issue, to sell something, or perhaps some other thought. And how do you build your negotiation toolkit? What tools do you have available to you? Active listening is in your toolkit with open-ended questions. Paraphrasing. If I understood you correctly, Stephen, you said that you really need to have a minimum of 1/2 of the juice. So restating is, am I clear? Am I correct on that? Problem
Yes.
solving with interest-based models. That's good. Communication skills, verbal and nonverbal. Your BATNA and your objectives. Those are tools that you will use. You have to have some personalized strategies as well. What could you improve on in terms of your role play? What will make it more beneficial? And you have to have your own personal action plan. What is my self-assessment? Am I good at this or not? I'll send Christina after the session a self-assessment checklist that each of you can then print out and have. And you'll figure out really where you are in terms of your level of skills. But it's about execution. It's about checklists. It's about guides, providing tools and strategies you can effectively influence and negotiate across teams, tailor your approach to organizational needs, and develop your own personal action plan. So that will be a one-pager that I will send to Christina and that she will share with you. So now if I said to you, what business are we in? What would you say? What are the answers? Are they right here? Are we in the business of compromise? I think every day is a compromise, whether you're in R&D commercial, product development, sales. What else? What other departments do you work in? IT? If you're not negotiating and you have an IT failure, what happens? Go ahead.
Supply chain,
Okay. What else? Give me a department that represents one of you.
quality,
Quality. Okay. On whom are you dependent in that room to ensure that you have quality, that you feel good about the job that you do? What other departments interact with you?
all of them. So
All of them.
manufacturing, procurement, supply chain, IT, finance, MS&T, it's technical departments, clinical, QC, all of them.
Okay, so you can't do your job unless they all cooperate in some way, right? Unless they do whatever piece they need to have to put into the product, because quality is the bottom line, right? And then if you don't have quality, the next people can't take it to market. And the next people can't create a profit. And the next person in the chain cannot do whatever it is they're supposed to do. So you're dependent upon one another. You're dependent upon the ability to compromise, the ability to prepare your piece so that they can do their piece.
That's correct.
Like in an assembly line for cars, one piece goes in, the next piece goes in, the next piece goes in. You have to prepare. You have to resolve issues that come to focus between you. You have to execute. You have to influence. You have to negotiate. You have to persuade. And you have to, at some point, come across as if you have some level of authority that puts you in a position to do all of the above. So how do you do it? My recommendations to you: stay flexible and please be open to new ideas. She's in quality and she needs every one of you in the room to do what you do in order to make her job easier, in order to make her job possible. Maintain professionalism and respect throughout the negotiation. Prepare thoroughly and know your priorities and your alternatives. A half an orange, a quarter of an orange, or a piece of an egg. Be strategic about when to push and when to yield. When you're at a stop sign or a yield sign, and it says yield, does that mean that you're supposed to stop and wait for the other person from the other lane of traffic to go? What does it mean to you to see a yield sign? And I do have to tell you that I once drove a car in Ireland and my sister took it away from me. She lived in Monkstown and I was driving, but I went the wrong way around a rotary circle. And she was like a nervous wreck and said, there's no way I can drive with you. That's it. You're done. You're done. That's okay. That's quite all right. I wasn't offended. It was okay. I knew when to stop and I knew when to yield. Where I live in the state of Maryland, which is on the border of Washington, D.C., no one pays attention to a yield sign. It's as if it doesn't exist. No one in the state of Maryland pays attention to a stop sign because they know that no one's going to stop. You just kind of glide through it. You hope with hope and a prayer that the person in the other lane is going to stop in the other direction and that you'll be able to turn or do something. The signs that say no right on red, I might be the only person who ever stops right on red because I've lived in 5 or 6 states in 2 countries and I know what you're supposed to do. But here, if you're at a right on red and you don't go, the person behind you honks at you. As a matter of fact, when I first moved here, I wrote a blog post about the honking state. And I was talking about geese, but I meant people in cars because they honk all the time. They're so heavy on their horns because you're not violating the law like they would. No one gets a ticket. Everyone parks in a handicapped or disabled space without a special tag. And no one gets a citation. I don't even understand how it works. It's the strangest place I've ever lived. At least in other places, they pretended to pay attention. If it was a one-way street, they only went one way. Here, it says one way, but somebody wants to get to Starbucks for a coffee, and so they drive up the wrong way because they can get a parking place faster. I don't understand the mentality, but it is so dangerous that I've really opted many, many times to just take the metro instead, or to take what would be a tube, because it's safer, at least on the ground, underground, on the tracks. It's not quite so dangerous. But it is a real challenge, and it's something that we all face. What business do you think you're in? You're in quality, but you're in negotiation. Who in the room is in IT? Anyone in IT? Yeah?
No.
Okay. No? But can you function without IT?
No.
Do you need them?
Yeah.
This morning when I set my alarm, Alexa said, I can't change your alarm and I can't turn it off because the internet is not working. And I thought, oh, this is like not a good situation. I have a class to give and the internet is not working. And it turned out Alexa was wrong because how could she be speaking to me in the first place if the internet was not working, correct? When you think about it. And then I used to get offended, by the way, because I realized my husband must have programmed it or one of our kids did for him. Because every morning at 7:20, she says, good morning, Steve. And then she tells him about the weather. And I'm thinking, why doesn't she say good morning, Sharon? I always wondered why she doesn't say hello to me. And it's because I'm not programmed in her device. And therefore, she doesn't know who I am. Or she doesn't care that I know what the weather is outside and what the wind chill might be. It really doesn't matter to me. I can look on my phone. It's not a big deal. But I used to get offended when she gave her, good morning, Steve. Can't make it without IT. What about marketing? If you finished the product, if you finished the drug, if you finished whatever it was you were working on and you needed to get it to market, could you get it to market without a marketing department? Could you get it to market without consultants and others who are going to get it into hospitals and into companies and into the hands of consumers and into doctors' offices? Don't you need all of those people within your organization to make this work? And all of that is part and parcel of negotiation. All of that is what you do. You compromise, you prepare, you resolve, you execute, you influence, you negotiate, you persuade, and you have authority, whether you know that you have it or not. So when I send Christina this checklist for you, you'll be able to check it off. You'll know which things you must have and which things are negotiable. They're good to have, and you can work on developing them. And this is how you'll work on developing them. I'll give you some skills for that as well. But you also have the book, Go For It, with multiple stories that relate to things like contracting and HR and negotiations with physicians and negotiations for the sale of cars and homes and other things. Because life is, in fact, a negotiation. And we can up our influence and up our game or bring it back down and not have the ability to create a win-win situation if we're not playing the right game. It is, in fact, a game. It takes multiple players. You must make it work. What are your questions? What questions do you have?
Question.
Questions, comments? Sorry?
One question.
One question. Where do you draw the line between negotiating and manipulating situations?
When do you draw the line?
Sometimes
When you're negotiating? How much time do you have? How much time are you willing to give me? I could spend the whole day with you talking about that. You draw the line when you realize that it's going to be a no-win unless you're willing to budge. Unless each person is willing to give a little bit up, whether it's an orange or an egg or something else, unless you're each willing to move that timeline, like in R&D and in commercial, one wanted 6 months, one wanted 8 to 12. They eventually settled on 8. The person who needed 12 wasn't really telling the truth. They really only needed 8, but they wanted the extra just in case. I need extra room, extra time in case I need it. And so they built that into their proposal, but they didn't really need it. And they were willing to settle on 8 and make it work, but by working together. You decide when you're willing to give something up. You decide based upon what your own needs are, and not just your needs, because your needs also reflect the needs of your work group. There are other people within that group who are going to be impacted by the decision that you make. So if you're part of a group process or a team, and one person is at the negotiating table, you need to meet as a team first and decide what it is you're willing to budge on, what you hope to get out of it before you come to the table. You must do that.
Because you added the word manipulation.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that is another skill of, because we were talking about persuasion, negotiation, but not manipulation. So I'm not sure whether you can negotiate as well, manipulate. I do a lot with my kids, I have to say. Like, if you wanna, I don't know if that is a strategy as well.
You can manipulate situations, and I think you all do it. How many of you have kids? Or how many of you have ever been a kid? If you've been a teenager, have you ever manipulated your parents to get what you want? Have you ever fudged a little bit on why you need a car? When you think about it, manipulation with children often occurs when one person or one parent or one caregiver or a peer attempts to influence a child's thoughts, feelings, or behaviors for personal gain rather than the child's well-being. It's natural for parents to want to guide their children, but the line between influence and negotiation can blur, especially when you consider the fact that it could harm the child's emotional development. So common forms of manipulation, say with kids, the guilt tripping thing. We have this thing that we call mother guilt. You make the kid feel guilty for not complying. Like, if you love me, you do this. I mean, forget that. That's crazy. Exaggeration or overpromising, using false promises to get a desired behavior, like saying, we'll go to the amusement park if you clean your room first. But you don't really want to go to the amusement park, and you're going to lie and say, oh, it's closed today, or it's a holiday and it's not open. Fear of induction, using threats or fear-based tactics to control behavior, such as, if you don't listen, something bad will happen. Those are not good things. To avoid manipulation and build trust, and it works with kids and it works with everyone, communicate honestly. Be clear and truthful about your expectations and the consequences to build that foundation of trust. Set boundaries with empathy. Remember, by the way, that no is a complete sentence. When I talk to people, and I'm giving another class for you on the power of no, no is a complete sentence. It's okay to say no. It's okay to just know that you can't go on from that. I'm willing to walk away. This is my baton, and this is what I can accept and nothing more. So set boundaries, model healthy behaviors, demonstrate integrity and fairness in your interactions, and teach by example, and encourage open dialogue. Encourage kids and your peers to express their thoughts and their feelings without fear of retribution. No shaming, no blaming, having what we refer to, according to Amy Edmondson from Harvard, as a psychologically safe environment. one in which people feel trusted, they feel respected, and they're willing to voice their opinion. They don't worry that someone is going to shame or blame them or think that they're stupid or think that they don't know what they're talking about, because it's built on that interconnectivity. It's built on that trust. In a psychologically safe environment, negotiation works best. Everyone feels respected. Everyone knows that their opinion matters. And when you marry values like culture and people with the organizational values, people feel respect. They feel as if they're a part of the process, and they feel as if they do matter. That's what matters most. The big challenge is when your organizational culture doesn't align with your people culture, and you feel as if you're always at a loss and you're never going to be able to negotiate anything or get anything done because no one's willing to budge, because everyone's an expert and everyone knows it all. None of us, I promise you, knows it all. Not a single one of us. No matter how many scientific degrees you have, it doesn't matter. Those who succeed in the process are those who are willing to give a little. Those who are willing to trust the opinions of their peers and come to the table prepared to make it a win-win. Other questions, other comments? I think we have 30 seconds.
Yeah, Sharon, sorry. I just had a question on any advice you'd have about fostering trust and connection in negotiating when you have to go through a proxy or a third party and you're not dealing with someone directly. How would you still employ all the tools you've kind of mentioned today when you're not the one at the forefront?
So you're going through a third party to negotiate for you. In general, when that happens, you're telling the third party in advance what it is you're willing to accept. So in a legal case, for example, with personal injury or something else, your lawyer is going to negotiate, is going to discuss with the third party, with the mediator, this is what my client will take as a minimum. This is what we need to get out of it. This is what we'd like to get out of it. How can you help us get somewhere in between? To make them happy and to make the other party happy, to hold the other party accountable. But there's always a discussion ahead of time about what it is you're willing to take. Unless it's a divorce settlement. Then sometimes the two lawyers are not talking to one another. And that's when you see all of these horrible movies about divorces and people are like hating one another or killing one another or doing something else. Obviously, they've missed the boat. You have to be willing to share. You have to be willing to accept responsibility. And the mediator, which is a really, really hard job, is charged with the responsibility for making that happen and making everybody feel whole, even if that whole is only 1 ounce of juice from that orange. That person, if they do it well, is going to make you feel as if you won. I can send you another handout that's on third-party mediation if you'd like. I can send that to Christina for you as well. Okay?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you.
All right? Anything else? I think we're at the end of our time. Are we not, Christina?
We are, yeah. Is there any
Okay.
final question?
Yeah, can I ask one question? If you're
Sure.
trying to do a negotiation and let's say you most of the other side on board, but let's say you have one person that's not willing to accept or like sort of engage in the negotiation, is there, I suppose, a method of just kind of trying to isolate them or reduce down their influence?
Okay, I will send you a handout on that as well. And it's like having a hung jury. I have 12 people on my jury or 10 people on my jury, and nobody can all agree that this individual is guilty, even though they just murdered and bludgeoned half a dozen people. And I have the evidence, and the jury has the lawyers have presented their case, and there's no question at all that they're guilty, but one person is hung. Or a lot of people are willing to say that they are a hung jury and that they're willing to acquit and they're willing to do whatever just because they don't want to be on jury duty. They don't want to serve. It's an annoyance to them. They had to get up early and come there. They had to arrange transportation. They had to find someone to watch their kids. They had to miss work. They had to do things. And so they consider it an injustice and don't want to be there in the first place. But I can send you something on that as well, if there's a holdback. Okay? What you do to basically reframe with that person. So I have 5 pages I'm sending you right now. Okay?
Thanks.
All right? And there'll be a PDF. You can print them out. You can do whatever you like with them. Okay?
Perfect.
I actually might make them a Word document so that you can write all over them. Okay?
Thank you.